Do you guys want to know what I found about this blown case cartridge and the changes I made to my reloading process? Stay tuned and find out. Guys, let's revisit this 9mm cartridge issue that we talked about in the last video. There's going to be a lot of talking today, but I think it's helpful for you guys if you run into the same issue or similar issue to see the process I used to both determine the most likely reason for the failure and how I correct it moving forward. I've made some purchases and we'll discuss those new processes at the end of this video. If you want to bypass all this talk and see the changes, just move forward. So I had a lot of good comments wanting me to check a couple things in the previous video. One of those things was range pickups and using range pickups of unknown sources and the potential to be a bad case in there, maybe even a case that was used that was over pressured at some point in its life. So I kind of wanted to address that right now. For you, those of you that don't know, I actually have my own private range here. I'm showing you some video of that range now. There's a 200-yard rifle range, and next to that I have my pistol range, and there's a couple torso targets there. So most of my filming is done on my own private range. To the left of the trees, I have another range that goes out to 850 yards. We'll use those for the long-range target shooting. The reason why I tell you guys this is because all the cartridges that are reloaded are shot by me and were purchased by me. These were all once fired cases at some point in their life, ones that I purchased and use as part of my reloading. So any cartridge that comes off my range is only been reloaded by me, or it's a once fired case that somebody else, a shooting partner, is using. Nobody on my range uses reloaded cartridges except for myself. So I do have an ample supply of once fired brass that comes just through the process of shooting and having friends over when I shoot. So I did want to talk about that. So one of my other commenters wanted me to check the case overall length to check and see if it tested or passed a plunk test. So I have the next round that was in the magazine here. You can see it's in my Hornady case gauge. It's flush, it's not having any issues. So it's going through the plunk test just fine. These would have passed the plunk test when I did this originally, and it just falls right in there. No issues there. You can see the cartridge is damaged here on the nose. These are not berries. These are extreme bullets, 124 grain copper plated bullets, round nose, that I have been shooting. So there's a little damage there. That lead that's actually missing is what ended up in my thumb. Again, this was the last round that was in the magazine. And as far as overall length, let's just give it a check here. And it checks at 1.157. I load these at 1.160, so that's within range. There's a little bit of damage here on the actual nose, so that could be part of that issue there. So this was the next round in the cartridge, and like I said, or in the magazine, and it's passing those tests. Interestingly enough, this was a Tula case cartridge too, which is what the blown case was. I've got the blown case right here, and you can see that was a Tula, if it'll focus. Next question I had was regarding case head separation, that potentially that was a weakened case that had case head separation. I did want to show a couple things here. Since this was Tula brass, I went and pulled all my Tula brass that I had. I remembered when I purchased this brass, I bought 4 boxes. So there were 200 rounds. There were a little over 100 rounds here waiting to get loaded. And then I have some that were in the bunch that I shot. Of all of these, the cases, I checked them with the bore scope. I put the bore scope actually inside of here and looked on the inside around the case head and didn't see any case head separation issues or anything like that in either one of these. Normally you would see some cracking or a line or something on the inside, and you might also see a line on the outside. Generally, you see the line on the inside before you see the line on the outside. I don't know if that gets pushed out to the top or how that happens, but I do know on like bottleneck cases, I will see 300 Win Mag case is failing from the inside before you see anything on the outside. By the time you see a crack or something on the outside, it's really a little bit too late. But no issues with any of this Tula brass on the inside around the case head separation. I'm not sure how many loads I have on these. I'm guessing I have about 6, maybe 7 loads on this brass. I don't have that many on here. I usually have about 1,000 to 2,000 rounds of brass. A lot of it gets left on the range. You know, I don't do a real good job finding it. Sometimes I find it really late, you know, and you'll see like this piece of brass that actually kind of went through just a basic first cleaning. This is one I know for sure would have been sitting on the ground for a while. So case head separation I don't think was an issue anyway, but I did want to address that since that was one of the comments that was left in the video. So I've pretty well decided that this was an overpressure event. This is due to either a tight crimp or a long case that was too long or a double charge. So, you know, as I looked at this cartridge here, we noticed before that it looked like it was kind of oblong and round, and just for comparison, here's a good cartridge here. You can clearly see these are both 9 millimeters. The one on the left is the bad one. How much larger it is, just visually, it's much larger. The primer pocket's larger. In fact, if I take my primer pocket checkers here that I use, this is the no-go side here, and it fits in there and it moves quite a bit. Not only that, if I take the large primer checker and I stick it in there, it almost fits the go side. I mean, it almost goes in there. So it's really, really large primer pocket. That can only happen from an overpressure event, as far as I'm concerned. The other thing that that I saw against this thing too is just the wording that's here at the top, and we talked about that just a little bit. You can see it's very, very flat. The engraving on the Tula cases is fairly thick and heavy, if you can see it in there or not. So you can see just how smashed that got onto the back of the slide after it was fired. So yeah, I definitely think it was an overpressure event. So one of the things it could be is a tight crimp. That was easy to check. I just went back and loaded up some rounds, and as I looked at those rounds, the crimps were fine on them. The crimps were, my press was set up exactly the way it was set up the day that I loaded this. I basically just put the press up, brought it back down, loaded some rounds, and the crimp was just fine. So I can definitely eliminate tight crimp as being an issue. So guys, the other issue that it could be is that the case length was just too long. And if it's too long, then when it loads up into the chamber, it could hit the end of the chamber and force the brass to really crimp down on the bullet. So I wanted to see if maybe that was an issue. So I went and I pulled all the Tula brass that I had that was ready to go, and I checked all the case links on these. I have to tell you that I don't actually check the cartridge or the brass length. I have not found 9 millimeter to grow at all, and so over the years I just kind of stopped doing it. Well, as I checked this brass here, I actually found 3 cartridges that were long, and they were long by a good bit, and I was really surprised by that because I'd never seen that before. This one's 760, this one's 762, and this one's 761. So you can see, I think the max overall cartridge length for a 9 millimeter Luger is 0.754. The trim to length is 0.744. So this is over by 7 thousandths. One was 8 thousandths. It was over by quite a bit. I was surprised by that, but I don't think that was the issue. And let me get my barrel because I want to show you something. Hold on. So I've got the barrel out of the Smith & Wesson that we had this issue with, and as I put these in here and looked at them, they're all seating in there just fine and not mashed into the chamber. And you know, a few thousandths isn't going to make a huge deal, but as I looked at these, they're flush. So there's really no issue there. If we take the chamber gauge, the Hornady gauge, and drop these in here, these are even flush on the top here. So I don't think that long case is an issue. However, I will say this, I did not expect that. So even though I don't think that was an issue, it is something that I feel like we want to change or fix in the reloading process. I'm going to go back to trimming 9mm cartridges to the length. So again, like I said, I did find these three, and I checked all the brass that I shot that day, and nothing was even close. Most all the brass landed about .750. So I was really surprised to find some cartridges. Oh, and I've got this case here. This is the one that blew out. It's expanded and bulged and all that stuff, you know, but as I looked at it here, it's .753. So it's 754. I'm just turning it around a little bit. 753. It's within in spec. You know, even though it's bulged and expanded and cracked and all that, this one is within spec. Now, with the bulging and stuff, it'll more than likely shorten the length just a little bit, because as you run these through a bulge buster, they will lengthen just a hair. So anyway, I do think this is something we're going to want to fix, but I don't think that's the reason for this. So I don't feel like the tight crimp is the issue, or the long case is the issue. So the last thing that it could possibly be is a double charge. And the Lee Pro 1000, I mean, I've got a lot of experience with this. This is the powder measure that came from my machine here. And the way this thing works is when the cartridge goes up and it pushes this little lever up here, it will cycle this has to be in the down position. It'll cycle the powder into the cartridge, you see there? And then when this chain is pulled down by the carrier, it moves it back. And then when you put another cartridge in, it slips up, and then that little carrier moves forward, and the powder drops into the deal. So the safety chain here, when it's properly installed, and mine is installed, I've always had this installed specifically for double charges, it basically means that the press has to be at the bottom of its stroke before more powder gets into one of these little cylinder holes here to go down into the chute. So when this chain's installed, it's really a safety mechanism to keep you from double charging a case. Now you can still double charge a case if you move the plate carrier in reverse, backwards. You can lift it up and move it to the previous stage, and then when that thing comes back around, it'll dump another charge in there. But if you just hand pump it a little bit, it's not going to do a double charge. It really has to get down to the bottom of the stroke before it will allow the cartridge to get double charged. I mean, it has to be, that handle has to be nearly all the way down. The plate carrier has rotated and it's sitting in its spot before it ever allows any powder to get into one of these little holes here that you use to feed the powder down into the cartridge. So I mean, it's a pretty safe deal, and I feel pretty good about the fact that unless you do something stupid, you're not going to be able to double charge a case. But I still think we double charged a case, and I'm going to tell you why. But in this scenario here with this powder measure and many powder measures, you can have bridging happen. So a more likely scenario is the cartridge doesn't get a charge because the powder has bridged inside of here, and it's kind of clumped up around the hole, and it doesn't allow the powder to drop in there, and you can end up with a squib load. That's a more common scenario, and one that I've always been concerned about, because I have no way to check for that. Unless you visually inspect the case and see that there's no powder in it, then there's no way to know. You can't weigh it. 3.7 grains is not enough weight to be able to weigh all your cartridges and know for sure. Just the weight of each of these pieces of brass and the different thicknesses of heads and the different quality of the brass, you're going to get 3.7 grains difference, and there's just no reliable way to weigh that cartridge and know for sure that it is a squib load or not a squib load. So unless you can see down in that case, it's going to be really tough. And the thing is, I'm shooting tight group. You guys know that. Here's some powder, some tight group powder that I've got. I'm shooting a really low weight of 3.7 grains of this tight group. I shoot a lower weight because of the copper-plated lead bullets that I use. If they were full metal jackets or copper jacketed hollow points, I would definitely charge up a little bit to probably 4.0, 4.1, somewhere in there would be my guess. I try and keep my loads around 135 power factor, and I find that with the copper-plated bullets, I'm getting more like 130 or when I'm loading about 3.7, but on the jacketed hollow points that are full copper, I'll generally need to load up to about 4.0, 4.1, somewhere in there to get the same effect at 135 power factor. So because this is such a light load, you really can't see it in the case when it's coming around on the plate carrier. You would have to get over the top of it and look down in there, and that's one of the problems with Tight Group. Is it's such a small load of powder in a 9mm case that you can't see it. You could see a double charge if you're looking for it, because that would fill up the case, but a 9mm case will definitely take a double charge of Tight Group with no issues at all. In fact, it'd probably take 2.5 charges before it would start spilling out. So a double charge in a 9mm case, you're just not going to see that with Tight Group. And that's one of the risks that you run by running Tight Group. I like Tight Group. I've been shooting it a long time. It meters extremely well, and I've never had an issue with it until now. And I do think that I got a double charge in this case just based on everything that I'm seeing here. And I've really thought about it, and I think I know why I did that. So I want to talk about that next. So guys, what I really wanted to do was kind of revisit that day that I was loading. I remember that day clearly, and I remember it because if you remember, this gun, which is the one that I had the failure in, was a gun I bought for my wife, and it was one that I was excited to shoot because I really wanted to get some rounds down it. And as it turned out, I was completely out of ammo, so I needed to load some ammo up. So I was already on that particular day, I would say, feeling the need to get rounds done. I was out of ammo. I had a new gun that I wanted to shoot. I actually had some friends coming over for a day of fun. We were going to do a lot of shooting, and it just reminds me of pilots. You see a lot of these aviation accidents in general aviation, and a lot of times the pilots, they feel pressured to get somewhere. Like they have to get there, and they start taking some risks, or they start letting their guard down a little bit so that they can get to where they needed to go. And that's the time when they have accidents. So, I didn't have any ammo. I wanted to shoot the gun. I had friends coming over. I needed to get some ammo done. And so that's kind of how that day of reloading happened. And as it turns out, during that day, I had experienced an anomaly with my Lee-Pro 1000 where the cases would not drop from the case feeder onto the tray, onto the plate carrier. I have never had that issue. I've never had a time where the collator and the automatic case feeder didn't work perfectly. I've never had trouble with that. I've had times where the plate carrier wasn't indexed exactly perfect, and might have to adjust the turning deal on it. But I've never had a situation where the actual cartridge wouldn't fall through the tube and land on the plate carrier. And I have to tell you, I was pretty frustrated about that. I needed to get the ammo done, and here I am. I think I was 50 rounds in, and all of a sudden I started having trouble with this thing. And for about 10, 15 rounds, I was just really upset about it. And I think through the frustration of trying to figure out what was going on with the case feeder and trying to diagnose it, I still had cartridges on the plate carrier that were in various stages of loading. Some had powder in it. One was ready to be charged with a bullet. So because of that situation, I have a really sick feeling that I actually turned that plate carrier backwards. For whatever reason, instead of clearing out that plate carrier of all the bullets that were in there and just starting fresh and figuring out what the problem was, I tried to solve the problem while I was loading bullets. And I was just getting more and more frustrated. And in the end, what I did finally clear them all out, but I know I had about 4 or 5 rounds that I was kind of jacking around with, trying to make it work. In the end, a moth had apparently flown down in one of the tubes at some point while it was in storage, and it was dead down in the bottom. I didn't see it. And when I turned the automatic case feeder tube to the location, the moth was basically hanging up. I took it all apart, I cleaned the tubes out, and I didn't have any more problems. And the rest of the reloading went just fine. There were no issues after that. The other thing that I noticed is this particular piece of brass that was in here was at the bottom of the box of loaded rounds. Let me get one of those boxes. Hold on. So here, these are these Berry's plated bullets. They come in these little boxes, and I really like them. These boxes are really nice to be able to hold your finished rounds in, and this is basically what I carry them in there. And you can see I've got some bullets in here. There's probably about 40 or 50. But what's interesting is I remember that day, and I had shot almost all the ammo in here, and it was about this much left in the bottom when I pulled this cartridge out and stuck it in the gun. Strangely enough, as I think about that, that means that it was about the same time that I was having trouble with that loading the cartridge loader, the automatic case feeder on the Lee Pro 1000. And I would have got the cartridges around, potentially double charging this and dumped it into this box after plunk testing it, and never thought twice about it, you know. And then I fixed the issue with the moth that was inside the tube, and continued my loading and filled the rest of this box up. And that day we shot, this box holds about 250 rounds approximately. I've never counted fully, but it's about 250 rounds that it holds. You know, I shot, you know, a couple hundred rounds, and then, you know, I get towards the end of it, and I'm finally ready to start shooting this gun a little bit, because I shot several guns that day. I shot 4 guns, my AR-9 pistol, I shot my Smith & Wesson carry gun quite a bit, I shot my Kaniq TP9 quite a bit, and this was the last gun that I shot in the day, and it was at the bottom of the box. So I kind of think that that's what happened, and the frustration of trying to get this cartridge loading through the plate carrier correctly, I think for whatever reason I turned it back and then double charged the case and then continued on. So this leads me to the next thing about making sure this double charge doesn't happen again. You know, saying to myself mentally, I'm never going to move the shell plate carrier backwards during loading is not enough. I mean, I've already proven to myself that I was unable to remember that during this process. You know, I'm getting older, and you know, this mistake could potentially happen again. And also visually inspecting every case that goes through there, I'm not a big fan of that. I mean, obviously that's what many people do, is look down into the case. The case is hard to see with tight group in it. You cannot see down into the bottom of the case when it's in the Lee Pro 1000. I could change powders that would fill up the case capacity more, and if I did throw a double charge, it would spill out, and that would give me a visual indication. But I actually have a lot of tight group. I'm not saying that's a good reason not to do this, but I think there's a better solution to ensure that I don't have a double charge. But the other thing that has always bothered me about the Lee Pro 1000 is a squib load. And if there was bridging that was happening in that powder dispenser, you know, I wouldn't know that there was a squib load in there. I've never had a squib load, but that could happen, and that's something I feel like I need to fix. I need to be able to fix both scenarios, a double charge and a squib load. And I need that to happen without me having to think about doing that. You know, a visual inspection is nice, but I would like some kind of mechanical way that the press would alert me to the fact that I've got a double charge or I've got a squib load. So that's one thing that we need to take care of. The other thing is obviously those 3 cases here that were long. Like I said, I don't measure these case lengths. I don't think anybody really does until they run into a problem. But even though I don't think the long case length was the issue that caused this blown case, I just don't think that's the reason why I have the blown case. It is an issue that I found through this process. I need to fix that. We're going to have to make sure that we trim these cases. So that's something else that I need to worry about. So those are the 2 things that I really want to address as I move forward and change up how I do my reloading. So let's talk about that next. So guys, the Lee Pro 1000 that I use today, it's a 3-station press, you know, and honestly, what I really need to do at this advanced stage of my reloading career, I really need to be looking at a Dillon XL750, or maybe even this new Frankfurt Arsenal FX10 that's coming out. They both have a lot of safety features built into them that would help protect against double charges and squib loads. But the problem is it's just not in my budget. I mean, you're looking at over $1,000 worth of equipment to reload to reload brass, and honestly, if I needed to go back to single stage because of this issue, that's probably the more cost-effective thing for me to do today. So knowing that the Dillon or the new Frankfurt Arsenal is kind of out of my budget, I need to really think about how I can take my Lee Pro 1000 and turn it and add an additional 2 or 3 stations to it, basically turning it into a 5 or 6 station press. So as I got to looking at it, I was like, you know what? The Lee Pro 1000 has these, I don't remember what they call them, but they're quick change adapters that go on the top that you put your dies in here. And it's designed so that you can remove it easily and put another one in with everything set up and ready to go. So what I got to thinking is, well, maybe what I can do is take my reloading and split it up into two cycles, meaning, you know, I do one cycle with 3, and then I come back and I change the plate head and I do another cycle with 3, and that would give me the option for up to 6 stations. And then maybe through the course of that, I can add some safety mechanisms to it to ensure that the powder is doing what I need it to do. So that's kind of what I came up with. So I've ordered everything, it's here, I've tested it, and I'll just kind of show you guys what I'm thinking about doing here. So in the first cycle, this is what I come up with. Basically, this is the first stage here, and this is decapping and resizing of the 9mm brass. But before it even gets to the press, all this brass would have been bulge busted on my Lee app press, so I'll run these through the bulge buster with the primer in. And then once they come out of the bulge buster, I'll run them through the Lee Pro 1000, decapping them and resizing them. In the second stage, I've got that empty. There's nothing in there today. However, if this was like a 223, this would be a great place for a guy to put an expander mandrel for case neck tension. So that's what I would do if I was doing a 223 case, but in the 9mm, I don't need the station. And then in the next stage, what I've done is I've added the Lee quick trim die, the powered quick trim die, so I can decap, resize, I'll have an empty space, and then I'll trim it right here on the press. So that's what I came up with the first cycle. And then the second cycle, after it's gone through here and it's been trimmed, it's been resized, it's been decapped, they'll go through a cleaning process, and then the second stage will come in, and this cartridge will go in there. And what I've done here is I've got the Lee Pro Auto Drum. If you'll remember, I have been using the Lee Pro Auto Disc all this time, but as I mentioned, there's a chance that you could have bridging in this, and you can have bridging in the auto drum, but the general consensus online is that this auto drum actually throws better and is less susceptible to bridging. So I decided, you know what, why not go ahead and get the auto drum? Let's give it a try and see how it throws, if it has better consistency. And I can tell you right now, it has quite a bit better consistency than the auto disc. And with the tight group, you know, it runs really good. So the first stage is this. I'm dropping powder the first stage. In the second stage, I've added the RCBS lockout die. What this lockout die is, it ensures that the charge is correct, meaning if there's a double charge, it's going to lock the whole system out and it's not going to allow you to move. If there's no charge in it at all, or very little powder in the cartridge, it'll stop it also. So this RCBS lockout die is in the second stage. And then in the third stage, I have my bullet seating die, which also puts a crimp on it. So basically what I've done is I've taken my 3-station press and turned it into potentially 6 stations. Obviously I'm going to have to pull the handle twice, once for this one and then once for this one. But I'm considering this case prep here in the first round, and then finally charge and seating. One of the things that I like about this whole situation here is I have less going on as I move through the cycles. Decap and resize I've never had an issue with. It just works. And then the quick trim is the only thing I have to manually trim the cases as it goes through, just to get it down to the size, and that will ensure that all my cases are in the proper length. And then over here on this one, you know, the RCBS lockout die is going to stop the press and not allow it to run if I get a double charge or a squib load. The powder measure kind of runs on its own, so all I have to do is just put a bullet on top of the cartridge. That's the only manual thing I have to do. Lift the ram up and then bullet seat the deal. So that's kind of what I've done to change this. So what I want to do is I want to show you guys this on the press and show you how this looks with this new press setup that I'm doing, and show you just how much safer it is for me, and will keep this issue from essentially ever happening again. I mean, you would have to do something so idiotic. The powder, you would have to put the powder and do a double charge, okay? Then the lockout die would stop the press in the second stage, and even after it did that, you would have to bypass that and move to the next stage to put the bullet on it. So you would really have to mess up, and it's nearly impossible. So that's what I'm doing. We're going to put the stuff on the press, and I'm going to let you guys take a look at it. Okay guys, here we are. What I've got here in the first stage, as we talked about, was the decapping and sizing die for 9mm. There's nothing in the second spot. And then here I've got the Lee quick trim. I use just a little bit of oil on this. What do I use? Just like a thread cutting oil, or if you're going to drill holes in metal, really light oil in there. And then I use this Walmart special screwdriver deal, and that thing will just go right there in the top. And so let's go ahead and do some of these cases. I've got some loaded up, and you can see how this works. You can see the cutting's not real fast. It says to use screwdriver speed. I might go back and use something a little bit faster just to see if I can make this a little bit faster, but you can feel when it stops cutting. I'll do one more here. And this one has already stopped cutting. And then I'll show you the finish on this. If you look here, you'll see the finish is pretty good. It both cuts and chamfers, both the inside and the outside, deburrs and chamfers. So yeah, that works pretty good. Let's do a few more. Okay, there we go. So that's the first stage. I'm just calling that case prep. Again, it's depriming, and then it's trimming, chamfering, and deburring all in one step. I'll go ahead and get the rest of these done. I actually forgot one thing I wanted to talk about right here. You do need to make a modification to your plate carrier here at this stage. You'll need to remove a case indicator. It's what allows it to set a primer for the next deal. So you just remove this screw right here and remove this plastic piece. There is a little spring deal. I don't know if you guys can see it right here that holds the case in. You'll want to leave that on. You'll also remove the primer chute. And finally, you'll remove the plunger and spring that's in here. So all that will be left in the carrier plate will be just the ball and the spring that does the indexing here, which is really good because there's nothing to get gummed up. There's going to be a lot of brass shavings. So I've just been keeping a little brush around here, and then I'll just brush it off. When I get done with all the case prep, then what I'm doing is just removing the shell plate carrier, cleaning it off, blowing it out, and then I just spray a little dry lube on there. Let me get that. This is what I use here to lube the press. So I'll just spray this dry lube on there, and that way it doesn't pick up anything or stick anything, and then you've got this lube that's actually helping it run. So anytime I'm lubing this machine, with the exception of this power trim die, this is the only one that gets a little bit of oil in it. Everything else is just getting this dry lube. So I thought I'd tell you guys that before we get on to the next step. All right, guys, so what I wanted to show you right now is just how easy it is to swap this out. Here's my other head here for the powder and the seating and whatnot. You just untwist this here. It pulls right out. Then you drop this in here. Done. And then I'll double check the indexing on the plate carrier and just make sure that the plate carrier is lining up fine, and it is. So we're all good there. So that's how easy it is to change this thing out. Let me get some powder in here and we'll get some shells loaded up, and let's get. Okay guys, we're all set up. I've got powder in the powder hopper, and everything's ready to go. I wanted to show you real quick. Here's an empty case here. There's nothing in there. I wanted to show you guys just real quick how the lockout die works. Let's say I got a squib load and there's nothing in here, and it's moved to the lockout die position, which is number 2 back here. As I pull the handle up, you'll see that the press is going to lock up. It's not going to allow it to go all the way down. So I'll know at that moment that there's something wrong with that case. It just stops. It won't move anything. It won't do anything. So that's kind of how that lockout die works. Now let's say I had a double charge. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a double charge. There's one charge. There's 2 charges. So you guys can't probably see it from your view, but the case is almost full. It's moving into the lockout die position, and as it comes up, the thing locks out again. It won't allow the handle to go all the way down. So you'll know you've got something that you need to fix there. Now, if the charge is just perfect, if the charge is right, so there's 1 charge in there, it will allow it to go all the way down. And then I can move on to the next stage. So I know that I've got a good charge there. So that's how the lockout die works. I'm going to do some more testing on the lockout die and do a special video just on the lockout die, so you guys can see. I know some of the questions that I had was, well, how sensitive is it? If there's 1 grain of powder in there, will it lock it out? If there's 6 grains of powder in there, will it lock it out? How far away from my target charge will it actually lock out the system? So that's something I've yet to figure out. I do know this: if the case is empty or if it's double charged, it will lock it out every time. So okay, let's go ahead and get started here. I've got some cases loaded up, and we'll go ahead and just get started. So a case is going in. It's heading into the shell plate carrier. It's getting charged. It's moving to the lockout die, and it's happy. And now I just need to set a bullet here on top of the cartridge, and it's seating. So there's one cartridge ready to go. I've got another one here that just needs a bullet on it. And you guys can see just how easy this is. And with that lockout die, I'm not concerned about, having to visually inspect every case. You guys saw in my previous videos on this particular press, I do have the bullet feeder kit on it, or I do have the bullet feeder kit for it. And although I don't have it installed right now, it does work pretty well. I don't think I'm going to install it in this case. I think I'm going to leave it, because to get the quick change turret or the quick change die holder off and back on is difficult if you've got the bullet feeder on there. But since I don't have to worry about priming, I don't have to worry about anything else other than just putting a bullet on it, this actually works out pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with that. The last thing I wanted to mention is, I think I mentioned it earlier, but in case I didn't, the priming system is not functional on here because I've taken all the priming chute and everything out. You wouldn't be able to do it on the cartridges in the first cycle of case prep or this last cycle due to the fact that that you only have the 3 stations, and having that, I think the drops from the brass shavings would gum that system up if you try to do it during case prep. Obviously, I want to clean my brass after I do the case prep, so I run it back through a steel pin cleaning before I come back and do this final seating. So I'm doing my priming off press right now. However, I think what I might try and do at a later time is I've got another one of these gel plate carriers that you guys saw that has the priming and everything in there. I think there's a case for me to go ahead and put that on as a middle stage and just prime everything on this press. I've had pretty good luck with the priming on this press. Or I'll purchase the Lee automatic case primer system, which is identical to the Lee app press that I have and you guys have seen on previous videos, and that might just become my priming station. So I am priming off press. I am bulge busting off press. Other than that, all the other functions are coming through here. I'm getting really nice ammo after it's all done, so I'm pretty pleased with that. You guys are probably noticing there's a hollow point here. Is what I'm loading. I've got a video coming up that will talk about these. These are RMR multi-purpose round bullets I'm trying out, so I'll do another separate video on that. But anyway, that's everything about what I've changed, what I found out, what we were able to fix. Everything looks really good. I'm really pleased with the new setup. I feel like it's a lot safer now, and I'm looking forward to many more years of great reloading out of this press for 9mm. I will come back, as I said, and do another video, every step of my process in one video so you guys can see that. I also do plan to do a video on how to properly figure out what the seating depth should be on your bullets. So we'll talk about the seating depth and how I come up with that, and also how I come up with the power factor and everything else for the round as it's coming out of the gun. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. Please like, share, and subscribe. And you guys enjoy. Happy shooting.